Hello and welcome to today's workshop, which is an introduction to financial planning. We are proud to be supporting Financial Planning Week for another year. So if you've joined us as part of that initiative, you are very welcome and I hope you find it useful. Sorry, I'm Lindy Kroese and I'm your host for the evening webinar, which is an introduction to financial planning. We will cover what it means, whether it's valuable to you, and if it will give you some tips to take away after this. You can ask questions all the way through using the Q&A box on your screen, and I'll answer them at the end, or you can just email us and I'll reply to you by email. Oh, seems to be a bit slow this evening. There we go. In today's session, we're going to share with you the way we approach financial planning for our clients. You might be surprised to know that we are not going to be talking about investment returns, growth rates, or anything remotely technical. In fact, we won't be talking about money at all until we're probably about halfway through this. Oh, sorry. I'll take you through 6 key steps that we use as financial planners. I'll also then give you some tips on what to look for in a professional financial planner, should you choose to work with one. I'll also be giving you a handful of actions to start working on straight away. And you can always book a session with one of our financial planners for a free chat anytime. Okay, what is financial planning? Well, this is how I would describe it. Financial planning is an ongoing process to help you make sensible decisions about money and give you the best chance of achieving your goals in life. Please note the 3 sections that I've highlighted. It's ongoing. It's about making financial decisions and about having the end in mind. So let's explore that now. To use an analogy, life is like a really long journey. But a really great journey with plenty of fun, interest, and fulfillment isn't going to happen by accident. You're going to need to know where you're going, and you don't want to miss a thing along your journey. You'll need equipment, supplies, and resources, and you'll need them to last for the whole journey without worrying as you get close to the end that you're going to have to start using less. That means you'll need to do some planning. So we can think of money as being a resource for your life's journey, and you'll need to have a plan that's continually being refined and revisited to help you make sensible decisions about you and your money, because you want to have the best chance of achieving your goals for that journey. Okay, so the first step is when thinking about financial planning, is actually nothing to do with money. It's all about you. And whilst it's forward-looking to see where you're headed, it's important to look back at where you've come from and where you are today. Your past decision-making around money and experiences shape where you are today and has an impact, good or bad, on where you'll end up in the future. Looking forward is all about your vision and goals for the future. I'm going to give you a moment to take a look at the questions on your screen and think about your answers. Okay, So you probably won't be able to answer them in just a few minutes or a few seconds, I suppose. It will take some time and reflection. This isn't a pop quiz. It's all about your life and making the most of every day. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to work out your answers to these sorts of questions. After all, they're not something that we get asked every day. So this is one set of questions to think about. And I'm going to give you another set of questions. And whether you answer these questions now or this evening when you're sitting with your partner, I suggest you work through them together. Okay, so the next set of questions. This set of questions we regularly use as part of the exploratory work with our clients. Okay. So to summarize, question 1 asks you to imagine that you are financially secure. You have all the money that you need. How would you live your life if that was the case? Would you change anything? What would you do? You can almost think of this as being a lottery winning scenario. And I think most of us might have had that conversation with friends already about what we might do if that happens. So take a moment now to think about the first thoughts that pop into your mind when you read this question. Perhaps you might want to make a note of your thoughts. In the second question, we are told that your doctor breaks the bad news to you, that you only have 5 to 10 years left to live. It will happen suddenly and you will feel perfectly healthy until the moment you go. So you walk out of the doctor's surgery, take a deep breath and think about what you will do with the time you have. What changes will you make? In the third question, you were told that you visit your doctor this week and that you only have 1 day left to live. Please understand, this isn't a morbid question and it isn't being asked to make you feel sad. Okay, so you leave the surgery this time, you take another deep breath and you reflect on where you are today. You reflect on all your accomplishments and all the things that you've not yet done. And you ask yourself, what did I miss? Who did I not get to be? And what did I not get to do? So, your first tool to take away tonight and use yourself are these questions. And whether you pursue creating your own financial plan or not, I think most people find these questions very thought-provoking and it can often instigate change. So step 2. Now, having established from these questions what's important to you and what your goals are, we now need to think about step 2, which is what money do you have to be able to support those goals? Because the vast majority of goals we have in life need money. And I'm not talking about shiny things, but paying for comfort, security, and experiences. This is the sort of information you'll need to know. You'll need to know what you have, what you owe, what you earn, and what you spend. So I suggest making a list of everything in those categories and also thinking about whether they will change in the future, whether it's something that you can control or not. For example, is your spending likely to increase when your children are at university? Will your bills decrease if you move to another part of the country? Will your income change if you take a new job? What about if you have a difficult couple of years in your business? So we have forms provided at the back of this pack that will be emailed to you to give you an idea of how to set this information out in a way that's helpful for you and any professional financial planner you work with. So going over to step 3. Okay. What we are trying to find out from all this information that you've gathered about your wealth is whether there is enough to be able to meet all the goals on your wish list. If we use another analogy, imagine that all your spendable wealth goes into a bucket, the one you see on the screen. In this bucket, you put your salary every month, perhaps an inheritance you might receive, or some rental income. So basically, when you come into some money, it goes in this bucket. But there are tabs on the bottom of the bucket representing your spending, or if you like, see it as your lifestyle. Sometimes more goes into the bucket than goes out of the bucket, and so the water level rises. And when you stop working completely, there's nothing much going in, but the taps on the bottom are still flowing. Now, our role as financial planners is to make sure our clients don't run out of money, but also that they are not so careful that it builds up and starts to overflow. An empty bucket is a problem, but an overflowing bucket is not a success story either. It usually means you have held back and missed out on experiences and opportunities when you had the chance. So, what do you think? Do you think you have enough wealth to achieve everything that you identified? And in that first stage, when we were looking at your dreams and goals for the future? You may be able to do everything that's important to you today, but how does that change over the coming years? If there's not enough, where is the room for something to change? Is there a dream that you are willing to let go of, or would you be able to make a compromise? Let's use an example. If you want to stop working at 55 and buy a holiday home in, for example, Italy, if there is simply not enough money in the pot to be able to do that, something needs to shift. So, do you carry on working for another 5 years or give up on that Italian dream? Equally, if you're fairly confident that you can already do everything you like and more, go back to the answers you gave in stage 1. Is there anything more you'd like to be doing? People or causes you'd particularly like to help that would give you a sense of fulfillment and purpose? I guess the idea is not to hold back if you don't need to. So understanding the shape of your wealth over the very long term can be quite complicated to calculate. Professionals tend to use bespoke tools to forecast wealth and test out different scenarios easily. It's not impossible to do on your own to get a rough idea, but it's certainly a lot more difficult. Now, I want to show you an example of this and to introduce you to Stella. She's 50 and she's keen to make a few changes in her life since she got divorced. Stella looks very happy to be divorced, by the way. She's been to see her financial planner and they've gone through all her finances. So they've determined what she earns, what she spends, and the kind of lifestyle that she would like to be living. She wants a good, steady income and is keen to buy a new house, then start going on some more interesting holidays. So let's take a look at her plan.
So we're currently looking at a chart which shows Stella's spendable wealth for each year of her life. The timeline at the bottom shows her age between now and age 94. The other upright axis shows her liquid spendable wealth. Green is pension money and pink is cash, and you can see it growing over her lifetime, each column showing each year's worth of wealth. This particular forecast is based on Stella buying that house that she had her eye on, with a small mortgage, going on the holidays, and working until age 65. But this chart doesn't actually show her house value in any of these columns because she can't spend it unless she were to sell it and perhaps downsize later, which she doesn't want to do. This shows that her wealth is actually growing over her lifetime while she's working and then stays fairly steady throughout retirement. In short, she's got enough to do everything she had planned. So Stella then mentioned that actually she would love to do 1 or 2 other big once-in-a-lifetime trips, if that were possible. In the next few years, she'd love to go on a safari, visit the Taj Mahal and visit some of the top golf courses worldwide. She thinks that might cost perhaps £10,000 a year to do it really well. And she'd like to give £50,000 to her son to help him buy a house. And if possible, she'd really like to retire sooner than 65 if she could. Through a series of simulations, we find out that she actually can't quite do all of that. This forecast shows that her wealth rapidly runs out if she does everything that she just listed, and if she stops working at 60 rather than 65. Her pension money's run out by the time she's 80. It's just not sustainable. But we look at some alternatives. We see that she could work full-time to 60 as planned, and then part-time between 60 and 65. That feels like a reasonable compromise, and it gives us a much better picture. There are other ways of achieving this same result too. She could spend less, she could buy a smaller home, and so on. Each one of the variables will change the shape of her plan. Knowing what's possible gives Stella the confidence to find a house in that budget,
or perhaps a bit less if possible, and start planning her first trips away.
Oh no.
She knows that if she gives up the trips or buys a more modest house, she can afford to retire sooner. But actually, she enjoys work and is happy continuing if it means that she can travel the world and have a more robust plan.
There was a bit of an exciting period in that video. Okay, step 4. I hope that video made sense. It's a very useful tool and it can kind of give you a picture into the future. So step 4 of your financial plan is where it gets a bit more tricky. And there's no doubt that the greater the level of your wealth, the easier it is to make costly mistakes and the more a professional with expertise can add real value. At this stage, you are creating your financial plan. There is no right or wrong way of approaching this, but these are some of the areas that we would look at as financial planners. Firstly, look at where you can reduce unnecessary costs. The most substantial costs to be saved will probably be those that you pay out of your pensions and investment pots and against your mortgage. For pension and investments, typically it's common to find charges of 1% a year or more. That's too high for most people. We think about the fact that investment returns may only be 5% a year. Do you really want to be giving up about 1% of that? Very good investment portfolios and pension plans can be had for no more than 0.5%. These may sound like small numbers, but believe me, they're not when they're applied to your growing investments for the future and they are charged year in and year out. Similarly, with mortgage costs or credit cards, think about whether you have any ability to reduce the debt or the cost of that debt. Can you change your mortgage product? Are there any better deals or can you switch your credit card? Part of many people's financial plans include making things simpler. Can you bring old pension pots together, close some old savings accounts, and so on? where things start to get a bit more tricky is thinking about how to reduce tax. Again, this is where really substantial savings can be made that make a very big difference short and long term. You'll probably be familiar with amounts you can pay into pensions and ISAs, but that really is just the beginning. And the more you earn and the more wealth you have, the more difficult it is to avoid tax without really knowing what you are doing. So I always would recommend taking professional advice if you're right at the top of your allowances, if you're looking at reducing your inheritance tax liability, and if you're planning for a big change like retirement, where you'll be making decisions which can't be undone and can often be structured better from a tax perspective. As part of your plan, you should also think about whether you can improve returns and have on your investments and pensions while taking a sensible amount of risk. It's really important not to overlook stress testing your plan either. And we find this is something that most people forget about. Think about what would happen if you lost your job, if mortgage rates increased, if you were too unwell to work, or if your partner or children were very unwell and you need to care for them. And what about your parents? These are things I'm sure became a lot more relevant during the pandemic. So developing a contingency plan for these possibilities is essential because for most of us, having security is incredibly important. And the idea of suddenly not having enough money is a terrifying one. There are lots of things you can do yourself. But I'll emphasize again that for more complex planning, do ask a professional because mistakes can be made easily and they can really be undone and they can be extremely costly. And as we've already agreed, if you don't have enough money, you will be less able to do all the things you'd like to do in life. And that's definitely not where we want to be. So, step 5, how to make it happen. So having put together the framework of a financial plan, step 5 is literally how to make it happen. It sounds simple, but I know what often happens. All the effort is put into analyzing what you have, your budget, and where it all goes. And then it all gets a bit difficult. You agree to pick it up next week and it slips down the list of things to do. So my advice would be to have a plan that you can apply step by step. Not everything needs to be done on day one, but you should have a structure. Part of what I would suggest is to have a chat about your plan once a week or once a month for the first few months so that it doesn't drift and all the actions get dealt with. Again, this is where a professional becomes really handy. Step 6. So having applied your financial plan and put everything into action, you can just sit back and relax. Well, maybe not exactly. Actually, I recommend reviewing the whole thing at least once a year because things change. You get a pay rise, your costs go up, you decide to move house, you're on sick leave, or you receive an inheritance. Those are just some of the small things that can change. So things change and they keep on changing. And each time anything substantial changes, you should go back and review your plan. Okay, finding a professional financial planner. Okay, that ends the 6 steps, which I hope will be helpful. I've mentioned a few times that for many people, it makes sense to work with a professional financial planner. Now, this isn't an advert for Asset Balance, and I promise that this isn't a sales pitch. So what you have here is a list of all the things that I think are particularly important to have in a financial planner. And I want to emphasize that there are very many people who describe themselves as financial planners, but they actually do quite different things from one another. I suppose it's rather like describing yourself as a medical doctor. You could actually have a very different set of skills if you were a surgeon, a GP, or a therapist. Those are all doctors. And the vast majority of financial planners, or basically called financial advisors, will fix specific problems, but not look at the holistic picture. Many of them will use expensive investment portfolios, and many of them are restricted in some way as to what they can do for you. Typically, they'll have a limited range of investments that they'll recommend to you, and they will usually not be prepared to entertain giving you advice about tax, despite the fact that it makes such an enormous difference to your overall position. It's all very unusual for a financial advisor to look at your lifetime wealth position and to think about how you can protect yourself if things go wrong. Lastly, almost every financial planning company in the country will charge a percentage of the investments they manage for you. We don't do that because we believe that approach would mean we were conflicted in how we could advise you, and it would be unethical. Going back to the long journey analogy, look for someone who can advise you about your whole pension, the right things to wear and how they work together, not just what they happen to sell. Would you work with a company that only sold their own brand walking boots, wasn't interested in where you were going in them, and the cost depends on your shoe size? It doesn't make sense. It's far better to work with an expert who can put together the whole package of things you need, the best boots, and the trousers that would fit snugly around them. So to summarize, we have looked at what financial planning is and gone through the 6 financial planning steps. We also touched on what you should be looking for in a financial planner. At the back of this presentation pack, which will be emailed to you, are some extra materials which you can use to start your own financial plan. They include questions to ask a financial planning firm to determine whether they are right for you, an example of how to put together a picture of your overall wealth, including your income and expenditure. You also have some example questions to ask investment and pension providers, as well as your bank, lawyer, and insurance company. So I'd like to suggest your actions from today should be to start working through the 6 financial planning steps I gave you. Starting with step 1, which is discovering your vision and goals. I also want to remind you that we offer free consultancy sessions via video call to talk about financial planning and how it can help you. You can book those meetings via the booking button on our website using the details on the following slides. Also, if you are thinking of working with a financial planner, whether that's us or someone else, I recommend asking these 10 questions to help you understand whether they're right for you. Finally, you have some of our details here, and these slides will be emailed to you afterwards. Okay, now's your chance to ask us any questions you'd like. The floor is completely yours. You can chat using the Q&A box on the left or email us, and you can even call.